Welcome back to the Grand Theft World podcast. Tonight's guest is a filmmaker, and it's not just his first film. We've all seen his first film back in the day, Plandemic, and then he followed up with Plandemic 2. But most recently, Mikki Willis has brought to the world a masterpiece. I mean, it's hard to outdo those first two movies. He dug deep. He found the evidence. He brings you the artifact. It's called Plandemic 3, The Great Awakening. And it is a great awakening. And it's also a great appreciation for friend of the show, G. Edward Griffin, whose work is showcased as Mikki draws out the roots of collectivism and communism. And he sets forth a theme and narrative that I think just about anybody, right, left, in the middle, anywhere on the spectrum, can appreciate this movie, internalize it, and use it as a tool to embolden our culture of freedom. I'm welcoming tonight, for the first time on Grand Theft World, Mikki Willis. Mikki, welcome to the show. How you doing?
I'm doing fantastic. Great to be here.
All right. So not everyone has seen Plandemic 3, The Great Awakening. I was really excited because I got to see the premiere. I didn't get to go personally, but I got to watch it from afar. I got to watch the red carpet interviews. I got to see Del Bigtree and a lot of other friends and colleagues there. That was such a breath of fresh air. I think the freedom community has been lacking that sort of premiere, that sort of energy, that sort of conglomeration of brilliant freedom-based minds getting together. So before we even talk about the movie, how did you get this premiere together? It was at the Michael Dell Center. It was a very prestigious place. It looked like a Hollywood to do, and yet everyone there had integrity and ethics and morals. So it's very much different than a Hollywood to do. How'd that come together for you?
Yeah, no one on the red carpet saying, "Who are you wearing? Who's your designer?" It was about what are you doing in the world, which I much prefer. It was incredible. It was a collaboration between, you mentioned Del Bigtree, one of my good friends lives here in Austin, and we collaborate on a lot of things. And so I went to him first and asked him if he wanted to do the live stream, and he immediately said yes. And I can't say enough about the High Wire team. His show, he's got a show that everyone should watch at the High Wire, thehighwire.com. And his team is just pro. You see their operation, it's quite impressive. And they do this weekly show, and they then brought that to the red carpet, and it was just flawless. It looked like a Golden Globe event. And then the experience of the evening was something I'll never forget. It was a highlight of my career, most definitely. As I've been saying, it was more like a sporting event, because I think 2,500 people, balconies just filled with people, and to be in an environment with everyone you can imagine, from JP Sears to Alex Jones and all these podcasters and everybody in this room, and feeling safe to say out loud what you feel and think and believe, having that permission to be in an environment where everyone felt, supported to be themselves. It inspired this rather loud, participatory style of movie viewing, where people were yelling at the screen, and it was really fun. It was like a vaudeville show. But at the same time, a lot of tears, laughter, and ultimately, in the end, a lot of appreciation that the movie's been received in a way that I couldn't be happier.
Well, making movies is hard work, and they don't always get premieres like that. So as a filmmaker, I was really proud to see you get, you didn't get that on Plandemic 1, right? But that type of, it's not even appreciation for you. It's the power of getting all these people together for that single experience, that they were all there in person, had this experience together. And now for the rest of the life, that's a bond between them. So being able to have that appreciation, that comes after all the hard work, right? Now let's dig into the hard work. At what point during this Plandemic 1, 2, and 3 did you start thinking about a third movie? Because I can imagine when you did the first movie, you have more than enough for the first movie, and that carries over into a second movie. But the third movie is always difficult to pull off. And most of the time, people are kind of like, they've had it with that topic with the first two movies. You found a way to say, oh, we're going up a level. We're going to go more meta. You're going to see an overarching plan that reaches over 100 years, not just over 3 years and some 10 years of planning and these sort of things, right? So you really brought the audience up to a new level so that they could perceive this bigger picture of what's going on, if you'll pardon the pun. So at what point did you start thinking, I need to do Plandemic 3, and it's going to be on this kind of overarching topic of collectivism?
The whole Plandemic experience has been incredibly organic and guided by invisible intelligent forces out there. I would just say that. The Pandemic One, I didn't even intend it to be a movie in the beginning. It was, I knew Judy Mikovits. I had met her about a year before the pandemic was announced. And then when it was announced, I called her and I said, are you seeing what I'm seeing? And here's that Anthony Fauci character that used to work under. Here he is back at the helm of being America's doctor, quote unquote. And bad things are about to happen. Do you agree? She said, of course. And she started to break down for me what she knew was coming. And it sounded so important to me that I said, let's go to my office and do a sit down interview, and I'll cut this together for you and we'll put it out in the world and see if we can help wake some people up. It was just going to be an interview. But by the time I was editing it, I started to research every claim that she made, and found that everything she had stated was true and was checking out. And as that led me deeper down the rabbit hole, I realized that there's a really massive, massive cover-up happening here, and it's about to get worse in this world of corrupt science. And so I raised a little bit of money and turned it into a short documentary, and with no intention of doing a number two. But after it went out and did what it did, of course, riding on the momentum of it being seen, at this point, it's well over 1 billion times that people have watched this movie. But after it did what it did, and then also recognizing that, after the media came out to smear us, first citizens were celebrating. They were saying, thank you. Now I know I'm not crazy. And I knew something was going on. And then the media came out and said, no, you're wrong. They're wrong. They're liars. They're bad people. She's crazy. He's a conspiracy theorist, fame seeker, whatever they wanted to call us. Then when the citizens turned on us, I realized we have to respond to this. We have to go further so that they understand that they're being lied to. And this time, let's actually create a new style of filmmaking where everything we claim is, we show them on screen and we zoom in and we underline it. We show them the patent number, because I realized with Pandemic One that people weren't willing to do their own research. They just listened to the authorities. And so this time we wanted to validate. We'll show you where their money came from. We'll show you that Anthony Fauci funded gain of function research. We'll teach you about the Wuhan lab and all the other universities and patent holders that were involved. And that was going to be a 2-part movie, Pandemic 2. And I thought that's probably where it'll end. We'll do 2 30-minute movies. And then we realized the censorship was becoming so intense, and that even the word pandemic, which I just found out about 2 weeks ago, that the word pandemic is still so censored that it even shuts people down sometimes when they email each other with the word pandemic. It'll bounce back. And so they've completely banned the word pandemic. And so when we started to witness the length that they were going to try to shut us down, I said, let's just fold part 2 into part 1, because we may not have a third chance to get something out there. They're really after us at this point. So then that became a feature-length documentary. And then I didn't plan on a number 3, but then it became clear to me that, okay, everyone is obsessed on the COVID situation, and the media, obviously, they want us to be obsessing on masks and lockdowns and numbers and cases and all the stuff that they're repeating on loop. And we said, it's not really about COVID, and it's actually not really even about a vaccine. Some people think that it was all COVID was brought in for the vaccine. Well, at a certain level, there's people that just want to make money in big pharma, and for them, it was about the vaccine. But there's a much bigger picture here, and this has been happening for decades. So this is leveraged to reduce our civil liberties and our human rights. And so why don't we tell that story? Why don't we help people understand what these crises are really used for, and where this is headed, and really show the comparison of how China got to where China was one of my main goals. And the other nation that's just a little bit ahead of the US, which is Canada, in its level of totalitarianism. Let's feature these 2 nations and a lot of other things, so we can understand that even the Black Lives Matter movement that so many of us knew right away was like, that's not the way you support minorities or Black people or anything. This is a big con. And then so we wanted to show that a lot of the money came from and went to Chinese communist parties that was raised in the name of Black Lives Matter. And when people start to understand that there are these 100-year-old forces that have been trying to capture the entire world with this structure of communism, which ultimately it's not even really about communism, it's about control. Communism is just a method in which to lull people into a political structure that will then have them willfully surrender their rights so that they can ultimately be controlled and surveyed at all times. And so that's what led me organically into realizing that we needed a number 3. And now, a week ago, I decided there will be a number 4.
Well, yeah, I mean, you could show the origins of that collectivism and communism, and it comes back to Wall Street and the city of London. There's a whole interesting picture there. I'm not sure what you had in mind, but I'm pretty sure that right after I saw your movie, I saw it on a Saturday night. I think that's when the premiere was. I had a Q&A with some of my students on Sunday, and I talked with them about it for about 20 minutes.
Mm-hmm.
And I said, I don't know, Mikki, but if he's planning a pandemic 4, like there's a whole ton of evidence that the public needs to see that you have now paved a ramp so that they could understand such things. So I was really excited. And I texted Ed that night because I was so proud that he's getting the recognition that he deserves after, 55 years of this work. And I was a big fan of that footage that you put in the movie. So I was like, this is brilliant. And I had, I already had a lot of respect for you, bro. But when I watched that premiere that night, I was like, you're knocking it out of the park.
Oh,
and I'd be happy to carry the bat over to you at the plate or however this works.
Yeah, well, thank you for that. Well, when it comes time to do number 4, I'll reach out to you and get your take on what that additional information is. But in large part, it's really going to be about the next move to rob us of our energy independence, and that's kind of the final stage.
Yeah, right on. All right, so I want to touch back because you mentioned Fauci. Like you kind of saw what Fauci was doing, and you went and talked to Mikki Willis about that, right?
Yeah.
Now, I have a friend, Kevin Booth, who made American Drug War 1 and 2. Really good films on the drug war. The first one covers crack, and then the second one was marijuana suppression. Kevin knew about these things, and he took up that mantle because he had lost his brother in the drug war. You had me crying in the first couple minutes of your film, bro, because you knew Fauci from another decade for another reason.
That's right. Yeah. So Anthony Fauci prescribed a medicine in the 80s and 90s called AZT that killed at minimum of 300,000 innocent people. And my brother was one of them. And how we learned about that before my brother had died, his friends were coming to my mother and saying, take him off that medicine. It's killing people. And she'd say, what? I don't understand how you would say that when America's top doctor is recommending it. And when we talked with our family doctor and all the doctors that are attending to my son, they're saying, oh no, it's just there's an acclimation period and his body will get used to it. And if you take him off of it, he's going to die. So she made the very, very difficult decision as a mother to follow the science. And that led to the death of her son. And the guilt of that, the trauma of that, had her surrender to her cancer that she had been fighting off for about, I want to say 15, 16 years that she was a cancer survivor. But I think the reality of the situation had her just cash it in, kind of like we've all heard the stories of the old couple that they're 80 years old and they're in good health, but suddenly the man dies and 2 weeks later the woman goes with him. It's like that will to live is something that we haven't even scratched the surface of. And I also think that there's a war against our will to live, because when we lose all of the things that are worth living and dying for, then that will gets decreased as well. If we don't have children, if we don't have a family, if we don't have a purpose and meaning in our life, then we're kind of left going, what is there to live for other than just myself? And that may be enough for some people, but for most people, it's not. We need each other. And so, my 34 days later, my mom died of her cancer that she survived through for 16 years. And so in my mid-20s, of course, that was a big shakeup for me. Ultimately, the greatest gift of my life, I always say the two greatest gifts my mom ever gave me was my life and her death. And what I mean by that is losing my mom was my greatest fear. I was raised by a single mom, and she was an incredible woman. And she was a mom to everyone in the neighborhood. And and it was always my greatest fear that she was kind of my brothers and sisters. I was an accidental birth. And so my brothers and sisters were in their teens by the time I was born. And so while I loved them and they loved me, there was a disconnect because I was a baby and they were just reaching that point of being 13, 14 years old. And so my mom was my rock. And so losing her was always my greatest fear. And when you survive your greatest fear, something happens to you and for you. And so that's why I say it was my greatest gift. Not that I would wish that my mother would die, of course, if I could give anything, if she could have stayed longer. But at the same time, I recognize the divinity in those tragedies. And that really pushed me to start looking at life in a deeper way, to recognize how fragile and precious life is. And in her name, I've done a lot of my work, doing my best to come out of my bad habits of I went the wrong way for a number of years. And I would always come back. And that was one of the things you and I have in common, the World Trade Center, as we mentioned before we went live. That was one of the things that I really was a snap to grid for me, was realizing after my experience of digging for survivors at the World Trade Center, just having this snap to grid moment where I had to ask myself, am I suddenly all Hollywood and all of my goals and pursuits of material, recognition and, all that stuff that Hollywood does to you. I could see it for what it was. And I had to ask myself, like, am I still my mother's son, or has this thing changed me? And the answer was it had changed me. And I had kind of dropped the morals and integrity that I was raised by, and I was trying to make it in this dog eat dog world of Hollywood, and learn how to manipulate and womanize and all these things that system requires of you to survive. And so that situation had me snap to grid to realize that I was heading in the wrong direction, and a lot of my work was selfish. A lot of my life goals were just purely about me. And so what a wonderful gift that through the awakening that my mother's death created for me, and then being on the World Trade Center to then suddenly crystallize it, to realize that it was time to do my best to get back on track of what I came here to do.
You searched for survivors at ground zero for 3 days. Did you guys find anyone to rescue?
We did not, no. But that was one of the things that really woke me up to the beauty of humanity. And I'll explain to you what I mean by that. The only thing that we were able to save was a rescue dog. And I was part of that, saving that dog. It was going into full cardiac arrest. And if you can imagine, there were a couple thousand of us there, but probably 200 of us circled up around this dog. And it meant so much to people because everyone was there. And this is like deep into day 2. Everyone was there to try to save a life. And when we were starting to come to the realization that it was very unlikely that that was going to happen, that all the bodies that we were finding were not alive in elevator shafts and what have you, and crushed under fire trucks. And when this opportunity came up for all of these humans, men and women, to rush to a truck to get oxygen, to try to fit a human designed oxygen mask around the face of a dog to make sure that oxygen went in, as we're trying to give CPR to a German Shepherd that had its paws burned up. And then to see that dog come back to life, I looked around at all the people, and I was just very moving, because some people had tears in their eyes, but you could just feel that primal intrinsic need to support each other, and that we were able to save one life, be it a dog, was so satisfying and fulfilling, more than any possession that the collective of that group owned. And that was one of the beautiful things that I experienced, that had me realize that when something happens that is so far beyond our scope of this world that we've designed and that we have declared to be so important, this world of cars and homes and gadgets and devices and things that really don't matter. I'm not against those things, but putting them above relationship, above honor, above integrity, above the real morals and principles that we were born to live within, has done a lot of damage to us. And so for us to come back to this experience of remembering, for me to come back to this experience of recognizing that the, watching the finest automobiles ever made on Wall Street just get flipped over and crushed for rescue vehicles to make their way in, to see a building that I was in the day before, I'm now standing on top of it and it's dust. To recognize that the things that we held as being most exotic and beautiful and giant and powerful were just reduced to nothingness, all in a matter of minutes, was such an incredible awakening for me to then see the people around this dog. And I had a couple of other really incredible experiences while I was there that had me realize, and what I ultimately said to myself was, this is who we are. When something happens so much bigger than our own personas, our own egos, our own name and form, what we are trying to protect and amplify and enrich in the world, when something happens that's so much bigger than that, people almost become like cells in a body. The cells don't have their own identities. They're working to bring life to one organism. And that's what it felt like happened. Like it was just all the cells came together. And it didn't matter if you had multiple ranks as a fire chief or military or you're a citizen. I was working on that plateau, that famous, where they made a postage stamp out of it, where the firefighters are putting up the flag. The little guy in that photo with the big bushy mustache, he and I were working up on that platform for all of day 3. And so I was right there in the middle of all of that. And, but to really recalibrate is ultimately what it was, like really recalibrate what matters, what really matters in this life, because most of the crap that we pursue has nothing to do with anything important. And so that changed me. And that's when I don't think I'd be the father I am today, the husband that I am today, the friend that I am to my friends, if it weren't for realizing, and sometimes I fall off the wagon and start to get caught up in the material world. And I have to come back to remember, none of this crap matters. You can have it, you can pursue it, you can play with it, you can do all of that, but never make the mistake that this is what matters.
Between 9/11 and COVID, what was your learning journey like? What were your levels of realization? And my metric would be like 2016, you supported Bernie. So you had made it that far to like, we need to change and Bernie might be that thing. And then you realize that theft is not ethical.
That's right. Yeah. So the awakening leads me to realizing what's important. And then I, being uneducated in the world of politics at the time, I find the voice that resonates most with me. And it's weaponized compassion is ultimately what we call it in the Great Awakening. And I stand by that, because it was, I think, a lot of the manipulation tactics, mind control tactics, whatever you want to call them, are what we've learned that they're designed for either highly educated people or deeply caring people. So they get you on an emotional basis, or they get you on that you have. Most highly educated people have been indoctrinated by years of government education. And so they've learned to bow to professor, to bow to their medical school teachers, whatever it might be. And they just see science as the God. It's a religion. And so you don't question it. And that's how they have been indoctrinated to learn. And so that's why, as I've been saying on every podcast, that's why you have the Sam Harrises of the world, the Neil deGrasse Tysons of the world, some of these truly off the chart IQ level, highly intelligent people who were the worst in shaming the world for daring to think for yourself. Run out and get this vaccine right now. These people, that are highly intelligent, and that's partly because they have been indoctrinated by government education. And then you had the people like myself that got lulled into the Bernie cult because I'm raised by a single mom on welfare, and he starts talking about women in need and people at the bottom. And I just thought, God, this would have been wonderful to have this man when I was growing up, someone who got our experience and what a struggle it was. My sisters would at the end of the month have to go to the local gas station and steal toilet paper because we'd run out of money, and it's like, to have that, somebody that really gets our experience, that isn't just for the elite, I'm in. I knew very little about socialism, but I learned a lot. I ended up on the road with Bernie Sanders as a filmmaker, documenting his 2016 run. And that's when I saw behind the curtain, and I started to realize that I had been captured because I care. I don't confuse myself with to be a highly educated person, because I skipped university, and I'm so glad I did. I probably wouldn't be here with you now had I gone through one of those indoctrination programs. There's some great colleges out there, but the vast majority of them have been captured. And so, yeah, it led me into supporting Bernie Sanders, and then realizing I had enough of my critical thinking ability intact, that I started to realize, as I was asking people important questions while I was on the road with him, that these people don't really understand what they're fiercely supporting. Either do I. And so that's when I started to ask the question, as I do in the movie, are we hypnotized? Am I hypnotized? Because something's not matching here. Like we're 100% all for it, but we don't even know what that all is. And so we're just emotionally motivated. And the moment I withdrew my support for Sanders, then I saw the reality of that tribe that I had unwittingly become a member of, and how quick they turned on me, and how quick I went from being the hero of helping to build Bernie's grassroots campaign to suddenly being a traitor, like being called a traitor in the very country that I love, was really weird for me. And that's when I realized that this is a cult. There's something, these people are mind controlled, and I was part of that. And so it took me a process of quite a while to wake up and to become the witness of my own thinker, to realize, to put the will back in my hand. And during that process of my awakening, as I went deep to really discover how did we get here, is when I stumbled upon the work of G. Edward Griffin.
So Griffin in your arc is like like a turning point where something's wrong, but no one had given voice to it yet. And here's this articulate, speaker from decades ago just laying it out. And it's matter of fact, and it's still going on today. That's an evergreen piece of content, and that helped you make your right turn towards Albuquerque.
Well, yeah, it's what the moment I saw the first film of G. Edward Griffin, for those who don't know, he, in the 60s, he began warning the world about the communist revolution that was coming. And the thing that makes it so interesting is he made 3 or 4 films, and also conducted some very important interviews with like Yuri Brezmenov, people like that. He made some beautiful black and white films in the living room of his home, and he'd have 20 guests over, and he would tell them what's coming. And when I first saw, the first film I saw was More Deadly Than War. And that blew my mind, because as I'm watching it, I'm realizing all of this is happening right now. They're defunding the police. This is what he's told everyone. This is what they're going to do. Now, the thing that made it interesting was it wasn't just one man. It wasn't like, David Icke and Alex Jones have been really prophetic and have been, some wrong, but mostly right. But they've been way ahead of the curve. But mostly they're just regurgitating what they've learned. And so a lot of it's being filtered through their voice and their interpretation of what they've learned. And with G. Edward Griffin, it was different. It was very little of his personal opinion. He was simply reading from their manifestos and their books, saying, this is what they say they're going to do, and here's their words. And that was what really grabbed my attention. Like, they say they're going to defund the police, they're going to create autonomous zones, they're going to create race wars, they're going to burn down the cities, they're going to come after the children. And they're going to first begin with the label of socialism, and that's a stepping stone towards communism. They just spelled it out and said, this is what we're really going to do. And that was just mind-blowing for me. As a filmmaker, immediately I could see the split screens. I could see, like, as he's saying this, I would love to create something that then we show it's happening right here, right in front of us. And people can understand why this series is called Plandemic. It's an epidemic, but it's planned. And I don't just mean COVID. I mean all of the woke ideologies that are now rapidly metastasizing within our culture.
Yeah. I interviewed an author a couple weeks ago, Michael Rechtenwald, who wrote Gulu Ghoul, Archipelago, and then Springtime for Snowflakes. He was a Marxist professor at NYU. He was all fine with Marxism until this woke stuff started happening. And he said, wait a minute, this is a whole different thing. He protested. NYU fired him, made him persona non grata. Then he sued them and he won. And now he's out there on his own. So his turning point was like running up against it in the system at work. Yours was little extracurricular education where you're like, wait a minute, this guy has a point. And then you can visualize. I could see him saying this and putting some B-roll here to show that what he's talking about is going on today. Right. And then I thought one of his best interviews back in the day, or like the most meaningful, was Norman Dodd, the guy who ran the Reese Committee, because Dodd showed that the Rockefeller, Carnegie, and Ford foundations were working together to collectivize the whole country, to change the attitudes, values, behaviors, and beliefs of Americans to be in line with the Soviet Union. And this started like back in the 30s. So once you had Griffin, there was Charlotte Iserbyt, there was a couple other people that were blowing the whistle similarly, but they didn't really know each other yet. And as like the decades go by, they get closer, they meet each other, they write books, and then things start to get a better picture. So I always feel like we should have figured this out earlier, because some of these people were pointing it out. Mm-hmm. But there's a whole thing that has to happen for a critical mass to be built around that awareness. And we didn't have the technology or the media back then to do it. Griffin tried, like that was a pain in the ass making that 16 millimeter film and reel to reel and all that stuff, editing. We now have at our fingertips Hollywood grade filmmaking capabilities. And you, with your experience and your talent, and you kind of got burned with Bernie, you picked it up like a football run, you know, that's a fumble, and you're running for the end zone. You're like, I can make this, I can do this part. And so at what point did you go from a concept of seeing Griffin and thinking about that B-roll to, I should just call Judy Mikovits and get this started? Or like, what was the what was the spark that really started the fire?
With the Plandemic series itself?
Yeah.
Yeah, you know, it was just, I was introduced to Judy about a year before the pandemic was announced, and the idea was introduced to her by another doctor friend of mine, and the idea was that I would turn her story into a movie like Erin Brockovich, a narrative feature. And I sat down and listened to her story, knew right away she was an honest woman, and loved her immediately. She's just a no BS, no censor, no frills, just she is who she is. And I love people like that. And so we clicked immediately. As a matter of fact, she'll be here with me on Sunday. She's coming in for the weekend. She's very close with my family. So she said she needs some family time. So we become that close. I met with her, but I was already making another documentary at the time. So I was out for 8 months or a year. And I told her, I'm really sorry, because I would love to make this, but you don't want to wait a year for me. And so I'll try to maybe shop it around, help you shop it around, and see if we can get your movie made. And then a year goes by, you know, I've kind of forgotten about that project and wasn't able to really do anything with it. Didn't have any materials. She had nothing on video or anything to show, no treatment or anything like that. So it just kind of forgot about it. And then the pandemic is announced, and I think, you know, quickly, I know something's going on. I don't buy it immediately. As soon as I hear there's some virus that's being spread, I go, here it comes. Knowing what was going on in the world of politics, knowing the upheaval that Trump created, knowing that everything was failing, from Russiagate to all the impeachment crap and to all the stuff that was happening, it was just prime for another false flag, something to happen to divert all of our attention. And so
now at that point, did you know about DARPA, gain of function, Event 201, Eco Health Alliance, any of this stuff that comes up once you start to look at it? Okay, right. Okay.
None of it.
Good.
And I just knew, and the whistleblowers that I was working with on the project that I was directing at the time, which was to really expose mainstream media, they were all talking. We had a little thread that we were on. They were all saying, "Oh yeah, they actually said, be ready for another 9/11 size event." And then 2 weeks later, the pandemic is announced. And so I called Judy and I said, "Are you seeing what I'm seeing?" She said, "Of course." And she lived 20 minutes from me at the time, and I went and I sat down with her, and she started to tell me what she thought was happening and what was going to be happening. And I said, let's stop and would you come to my studio? I want to put this on camera because this is too important. And at the time I thought at the very most, it's going to be a little podcast interview. Two people sit down. She tells her story. I edit it together. I give it to her as a gift. And then now maybe she can actually use this to get her movie made, because I always felt bad that I wasn't able to help her. And so we shot the interview. And as I'm editing the interview, I'm researching everything. I'm realizing everything she said is true. Wow. And then, like I said, I just put more money into it and turned it into what it became, what it became. And you know, of course, driven also by the knowledge of what happened to my brother through Anthony Fauci, and really feeling like I wish I could have done something then, but we didn't have the internet and the ability to do what we're doing now. And I didn't have any way. I wasn't a filmmaker then and didn't really know what to do other than just mourn. And so this was a chance to actually say, let's see if we can get the information out there so people can understand the history of this man and what this situation is going to do. I released a video in April. Right. It was 2 weeks after the pandemic is announced, whenever that was. I released a video shot on my cell phone that's still somehow on YouTube, where I said, I'm going to go out on the limb and I'm going to tell everyone that this is a man-made virus, and it is being intentionally released to kill our economy and to bring us into a state of desperation and to distract us. And I laid it all out. And I forgot I made that video until I did Del Bigtree's High Wire, and they played the video while I was on the show. And I said, what, when was that? Oh, 2 weeks after the pandemic was announced. I got it right. Interesting. I don't know how I channeled that information, but it turned out just because I understood the history of Anthony Fauci was enough for me to know. And then you can just kind of put the puzzle pieces together. You realize, well, if it isn't about that, then what might this be? What's the real purpose of this? And you start digging in, and then you look into H1N1 and Zika and all these other things, and you realize, God, there's foul play has happened, Ebola, and all these things. It's very similar, where people like Fauci, or Fauci himself, has denied medicines that are tried, true, and tested, all so that a patentable, profitable medicine can be the cure, the only cure. And that medicine each time has done great damage, like left people paralyzed, sterilized. And yet somehow he maintains this position. Like, this country's more corrupt than I thought it was. And that's when I started to discover, as I went down the rabbit hole and realized, Event 201, what the hell is this? And then I watched that and my mind was blown, like I felt like I was watching G. Edward Griffin's More Deadly Than War, realizing, how can people not watch Event 201 and understand this is planned? They literally did a tabletop exercise months before the pandemic was announced, and went through every detail. And if you see the opening of Plandemic 2, some of that stuff in there, people thought we faked it, because it's so one-to-one, where we have them doing their mock news reports, and then we have an actual newscaster looking like the same guy saying exactly the same thing they said a year before in their scripted mock news report. And newscasters coming on saying, we're out of PPE, face protection and gloves, and all the stuff that ended up being reported on the news. And so the question I ask in Plandemic 2 is, and this is all sponsored by the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, ironically, what I ask in there is, if all these wealthy people that were in the room, Johns Hopkins and all these people are there, and they're all hearing a year before the pandemic what was going to happen, and ultimately what was the real cause of that, is they predicted that there's going to be this backlash from these crazy citizens that are going to put the whole world in danger by not wanting to get this vaccine. And so what it was preparing these other major influencers, planting within their psyche that when those people do that, be ready to attack them. We need to have a plan because we know we're going to get backlash. That's really what Event 201 was about, is to seed their reaction to those who weren't willing to comply. But when you see that, I highly recommend everyone go to plandemicseries.com and look at Plandemic 2 Indoctrination. If you're busy on time, just watch the first 10 minutes. It's going to blow your mind, because we do the same thing, side-by-side comparisons of, I think we call it simulation and reality. We show you the event 201, and then we show it happening in the real world exactly the way they said it would happen. And that's when you have to start, to really consider, either we're living in a crazy simulation, or these people have that level of control, either remotely, psychologically manipulating people to follow them, or they're literally controlling these newsrooms to say what they want them to say. And I think it's a bit of both.
Well, and I think that in situations like this, they bring all the layers. They had psychological studies at Yale that said when people resist the vaccine, what are we going to use? We're going to use peer pressure. We're going to threaten their jobs. Like, they knew all this stuff ahead of time. When they ran the drills like Event 201, Crimson Contagion, SPARS pandemic, all that sort of stuff, they knew PPE would be short. They knew all these things, and they did not prepare against any of those to mitigate them. At every turn, they turned out profiting amazingly from these opportunities that were surprises to them and everybody else, right? So on the surface, people who look at it are incredulous, but without the knowledge of how to dig into that and find the substance and start get veracity and meaning out of it, they bounce back to the official narrative. That's part of how it works. It's part of how, like, they keep them in the matrix, right? Other people around are agents and say, well, that's conspiracy theory. Don't look into the, gain of function and DARPA and Eco Health Alliance that's been doing it and still has a contract out to 2025 to do the same thing, right? Yeah. And when you see all this mRNA technology, it's not brought to you by Moderna. It came from DARPA. It was licensed to Moderna in 2013. All Fauci and these guys from BARDA are talking about it in 2019. We'd really like to do this, but there's too much bureaucracy. At that precise same time, they're doing Event 201, and at the same time, they just closed the Wuhan lab because it had leaked. It has escaped. Let's put it that way, right? Yeah. So I don't want to judge intent, but I can definitely judge from the beginning. They were not telling people the truth about the wet market or any of that stuff. And I only realized because I was incredulous. Somebody said, a friend of mine, Benny Wills, not Willis, Benny Wills, the comedian, he said, did you see Event 201? Bill Gates is behind this pandemic. I was like, that's crazy. You shouldn't say that online, Benny. And I looked it up. I'm like, wow, what? I'm not informed. Geez, thank you, Benny. Thank you. And then, a couple of those realizations later, I think it was Professor Francis Boyle, probably on Jones's show. And he's like, look, here's 2013. They're looking for the bat coronavirus. And here's where they do the ACE2 receptor. They have to do humanize the mice to get it to attach, because it wouldn't attach until they had the lab stuff going on. And I was just like, this is so far from what the public's being told. It's definitely one of the most grandiose times in history where if you listen to the news, you really are putting your life and your family's future at threat, because you don't know how to think through and parse these things critically for yourself yet.
Yeah, and so then that really begs the question of what the hell was this cyber polygon tabletop exercise about, and so we need to pay attention to that, because that's another, just like Event 201, preparing us to deal with this thing in advance called COVID. They've also done a cyber tabletop polygon exercise. Yeah, go for it.
The World Economic Forum ran a simulation where they have it's like electronic hacking, or what did they have? The 0-day type of inserts where they can make all the infrastructure crash, all the water, nuclear, all the stuff goes off. People are left without communication and they can't run stuff. So then they have an ultimate opportunity to come in and say martial law. Now it's all under, UN control, because the United States couldn't handle itself. And then it graduates to what Griffin was talking about back in the 60s.
That's exactly right. So people need to take that seriously. That's a real possibility that was all in preparation. That was, how long ago was that now? Probably a year and a half ago they did that. And all in preparation to seed the field for an event of that nature. And that's a scary one, because that one creates mass panic, and it will be incredibly deadly, because people are going to be left without food and communication and all of that. And so, not to scare people, but to have people understand that it's time for us all to get activated now, instead of just reacting to things when they happen. We need to come together now and become educated about these things and start to call them out in advance, because there's something very powerful. The more it's kind of why people who do dangerous work like myself will come out and make it very clear in statements that we are never, ever will be suicidal. And if you can preempt some of these narratives, then it's less likely that they can utilize those against you later. And so if we all come out to say, even like this, a couple of these latest whistleblowers against Biden, they had to come out to be, and the reason they're going so public and people are calling them brave, well, it's a smart thing to do, because the more that they can come out and say, I'm being threatened, the DOJ or the FBI, they've all come after me, here's what they've done. You say it loud to the world, it makes it more difficult for the bad. Not all those organizations are bad, but there's bad people within them, just like every club and organization in life. And so those particular bad people that have infiltrated these organizations, it makes it a little more difficult for them to then do something that would become public news, that would then be so obvious to the public that if somebody comes out and says the ABC agency is after me and they're threatening my life, and then that person ends up dead next month, they're going to have to answer to that. And so there's a real power in the people understanding things like cyber polygon,
Yeah.
cyber polygon. And
that's where they could do a vehicle hack and make your Mercedes crash into a tree like Michael Hastings.
Yeah,
right? Things like that.
It's important that people start to share the stuff, speak on it, share my movies, everything that's out there that's telling the truth. Get them out there, because the more widely spread they are, the more they're aware that we're watching. Because people will tell me now, they'll say, regarding the election stuff, we all know, all sides know that the elections have been vulnerable and hackable forever. 2016, it was all Democrats literally having machines hacked on the Senate floor in front of everybody. And then suddenly in 2020, same machines are the most secure in history, right? So it's just all a big lie. But so we all know, both sides know that the voting system is terribly vulnerable. It's just fact, okay? And people will say, I'm not going to vote this year because it doesn't matter because the system is so no, this is the time to vote more than ever. Realize that, yes, you're right. The system is completely corrupt and hackable, but we have more eyeballs on that now than we ever had before. And so the more that we can create a situation where we make it really difficult for certain organizations to come in and flip numbers or add boxes under tables or whatever it is, the more that everyone knows that the entire world is watching, the harder that becomes to do it on a mass scale the way that they've done it in the past. And so we need to get educated on these things, like Cyber Polygon, and start spreading it around there, because when the whole world is aware that there's a potential event happening, it kind of spoils the fun for those planning the event. It's like a surprise party, right? You're trying to surprise somebody for their birthday and the secret gets leaked, and you kind of go, well, what's the sense in doing the party now? Or at least the surprise element of it. So that's why it's important for people to understand that we are the media now, that this situation has birthed a generation of citizen journalists. And that's you. It's not CNN, it's not MSNBC, it's not Fox, it's none of these people. These are all paid actors saying what their puppet masters want them to say. It is what we're doing right now, one-to-one between two people on their own platforms, sharing what they know to be true. And then it's the next layer of that is, better be damn sure that what you're sharing is true. I learn a lot of things that I could be first to break a lot of information because people bring things to me way in advance. I just got some information today, but I don't care about being first. And a lot of times I'll know something and I'll take too long to research it and it hits the air and it's like, I could have broken that story, but I don't care. That's not what I'm here for. I just want to know that the story gets broken, but whatever is said is accurate. And so, take your time, research things. But I also think that organically people are becoming better and better, because all these people that were completely new to sharing news and information over the past 3 years, they've realized all of us have shared something online and had the audience pounce on us. This is old, this is debunked, this is fake, this is, and so all of that helps us fine tune and realize, well, don't move so fast. Don't just share something because someone you trust on Twitter shared it.
Mm.
Who knows what level of scrutiny they put that information through. And so all of that is important for us, because that's when we start to change things, when we actually know that we're not just these lowly citizens that are the worker bees of the world. We're now paying attention. We actually are helping to co-author the story of our lives. And we're not going to allow anyone to steal that pen from us anymore and to write us in a direction that we choose not to be.
One of my mentors, John Taylor Gatto, said, if you don't learn how to write your own script in life, you're forever going to be acting out someone else's script for your life. Like, if you don't learn how to write your own permission slip to do what you want and learn the skills to do that, you're going to be you're an instrument in their orchestra. And
well said.
Yeah. There's a lot more to be talked about, but I think we've laid a solid foundation for the audience today. We want them to go see Plandemic 3, The Great Awakening. Where should they do that, Mikki?
Everything I create in the name of Plandemic is free at plandemicseries.com or plandemic3.com. That'll take you to the same place. All 3 Plandemic movies are there for free. My book is even free now. I made a deal with my publisher. I didn't want to create a book because I was too busy. And I said, under one condition, and that is, once you make your money back, because I know there's an investment there, that we give it away, because I don't want to profit off the Plandemic brand. And there's a lot of reason for that. The reason that my film, Plandemic 1, is the most seen independent film and perhaps the most seen film in history. We can't really quantify the amount of times that, say, E.T. or Avatar have been seen on video. We can't really quantify that, but it's definitely outpaced what their theatrical viewership numbers are. But definitely the most seen independent film in history. And the reason is because we had to remove all barriers to entry. So there's my films are made by 100% donation. I invite anyone, there's a donation button on my site if you want to support my next film, which is going to be bigger and better than anything that we've done. But it's the people that have carried my films around the world. It really became a people-powered distribution model. And I'm grateful for that, eternally grateful for that. But to remove all of the necessity to create an ROI, a return on investment, and just give it to the people without restriction. I've had people go off and make money on my movies and sell tickets or whatever, and that's entirely up to them if they want to do that. I've had people call me and say, we did a little ticket thing and we want to send you half the money. And I say, nope, just donate it to charity or keep it. But I won't profit off of Plandemic. And the reason is 2 reasons. The people helped fund it through donations. And so to sell it, to make them pay for a ticket from a movie that they helped make doesn't feel right. But also this information has been stolen from the people and I'm just returning it. So I don't feel right about selling it back to the people. And so that's the model I'm going to stick with and until we don't need to do that any longer. But it's only made possible by the support of the people. And I think it's a beautiful thing. Just even like the Sound of Freedom movie that's out there right now. It's incredible that it's outpaced Indiana Jones and all of that. And that, with all the boycotts that are happening, I think it's an incredible illustration and finally awaken the people to understand that we have had the power all along. And we get to choose, we get to vote with our dollar, what we support and what we shut down. And so more of that, please.
I want to thank you so much for investing an hour with our audience today. And I want to invite you back in the future. And in the meantime, you've just told people how to see the movie, all the stuff that you're giving out for free, and how to support you along the way so you can keep doing what you do, because you're right. It is a beautiful process. When people see something needs to be done, these people say, I have some resources that you could use. I don't have time to do it. They put the resources over, you get a film made, and then it makes its money back, and then it goes out there for free.
Yeah.
Right.
Yes. And can I plug one more thing?
Please do.
I'm not big into sales, but this is something that I feel is.
I teach sales, Mikki. They expect you to have a call to action at the end of your interview right here.
Okay, perfect. I'm really bad at that. My wife always gets on me. I usually just refuse to do it, but I feel good about this because of the quality of the product, and that I feel like it's a win-win. That people really need this right now. If we understand what's happening with our collective compromised immune systems, whether you're vaccinated or not, more and more people are sick now than ever because their immune systems have been damaged. So my partner and I, JP Sears, the comedian, we have a new product out that was developed by two of the most genius formulators on the planet who would only do it for us. And it's a exclusive situation, which we've created an immune restoring, not an immune booster. Most things just to boost the immunity, but we created an immune restoring formula. It's called Fierce Immunity. And you can get that at Get Fierce Now. Get Fierce Now.
Now, is that Red Lion?
That is Rebel Lion.
Rebel Lion. That's what it was.
Yeah.
Okay. So I've seen JP talk about that.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
And when you guys want to offer a product like that, my entrepreneur hat is on. Do you go find the best chemists that can do that and then white label something they've all developed? Or
that's a really great question. No, this happened kind of by fluke. I was in this exploration already because my wife had approached me and she just said, sweetheart, how long do you plan on giving your movies away? Real gentle. And I said, why? She said, because our nest egg is almost gone. And I just don't know how much longer we can afford to do this. And I said, I know I'm going to try to create some kind of revenue model, but I just want to create something that is definitely also serves the world in a positive way. And I happened to be on a Zoom call regarding another business idea that somebody had presented to me. And these two scientists were on the call, and they were presented as like they came from all the biggest Johnson & Johnson, Pfizer, all that, and they left when they realized what they were working for. And they were top of the line. And they invented this new technology, and they were going to work with this new business endeavor. And they were so excited that they were able to bring them into the fold. And they were asking me to be the person that creating media for this new, it was kind of a new alternative to hospitals. It was a home service that would come to you because people were afraid to go to the hospitals. And this whole thing fell apart and it went away. But then I thought, what about those two? Let me call them. And I got a hold of them and I said, now that that's not going, we have this vision of creating, I want to create the best immune booster in the world. And Anton, who's from Austria, he goes, oh, we don't create immune boosters. And I said, oh, okay. He goes, well, we will create an immune restorer. And he goes, we already have the formula and we can tailor that for you. And he went into this whole thing and explained why it was something that broke it down for me and was like, most of the time people look at a bottle and they think the more ingredients, the better. And I said, yeah, that's what I do too. I take a grip full of supplements every morning. He said it's counterproductive. Most of the time, those ingredients are working against each other. And he said, you just need the perfect amount so that they actually support each other to go into the bloodstream to actually help you. And we have that formula. And anyway, so that's how it happened, is we just kind of stumbled upon them, and they were, for them, it was a dream come true. For us, it was a dream come true, because they said, we want to get this out to the world, but we don't have any marketing ability, and you have the reach through what you do. And so we joined partners, and then I brought JP into that, and we're just getting it off the ground right now.
That's awesome. All right, so we're going to check it out. What's the website for that?
Get Fierce Now.
Get Fierce Now, because
.com.
Yeah,
I always
.com.
forget that. Yes.
There's a lot of choices out there for supplements, but you want to do business with people you know and like, and that have done it right. They know what done right looks like, right? So JP takes health very seriously, and this is a good opportunity because it does balance out the wife situation. I did it for 10 years where I gave everything away for free. I'm like, this is too important. The world needs to know this stuff. There's, people trying to collectivize our country. And then at a certain point, when I became a dad, I was like, you know what? I need to be more responsible, and I'd rather teach my audience to make more money so that I can get my value in the market, and not have to do things with like playing for change with your hat out, hoping that you get the next movie or the next project done. So
I had a very good friend of mine a few years ago that said to me, you can't be the light of the world if you can't pay your light bill. It's like,
this is true.
This is true.
And thanks to those friends that have those tough talks with us to be like, hey, you need to offer more value to the market.
That's right.
All right, Mikki, I'll let you get back to your day. I'm looking forward to speaking with you again. And thank you for gracing us with your presence. Your movie is remarkable, and more people should see it. And this is how we get it done.
Hey, do me a favor, get my number from Liz and shoot me a text. I want to keep in touch with you because you're very knowledgeable, and I'll probably tap into you for my next project.
Will do.
Awesome, brother.
All right,
good
thanks.
work. Thank you.
All right, peace.